Today, with all the government help and all the government agencies, the costs are exploding through the roof. And the reason for that is all the subsidies. I mean, think about the student loan program and what that does. If the government didn't guarantee student loans, students couldn't borrow money to go to college. Nobody would lend it to them. It'd be too rich. And so now anybody who wants to go to school has access to the U.S. government co-signing their loans. So what happens is all the students bid against each other. They compete for slots in universities with government money. And so they bid the prices up. There's no restraint. I mean, whatever the price is, they can cover it because they can get the loans. The universities know this. They have no incentive to rein in costs. Whatever they increase tuitions to, the students are going to get the money because the government's guaranteeing the debt. So prices always go up. There is no free market to rein them in. The kids don't care, and obviously the universities want to keep charging more money, so they do it. I mean, if you think about it realistically, it should be cheaper to educate kids today. I mean, after all, look at all the new technology that we have that should make educating our children less expensive. Look at the fact that so many more kids are in school today. You've got economies of scale. You've got more kids at the universities. The cost per pupil should be coming down. Why isn't it? Why isn't the free market working in education? It's because of government. It's because I'm for the student. What I'm against is exorbitant tuitions, and that's what happens because of student loans. Because remember, the money is going to the schools. The kids aren't getting the money; they're getting the bills. They have to pay the money back. I mean, what would happen if we immediately canceled government guaranteed student loans? Right? Students couldn't borrow money. Would that mean that they wouldn't go to college? That the colleges would just have empty classrooms? Of course not. The colleges would immediately have to react to this drop in demand by slashing their costs and their overheads so that they could bring tuitions down to a level where people could actually afford to go. That's what would happen. But because of all this government aid, because of all these student loans, the universities don't have to do that. They don't have to make the cuts. They don't have to bring down costs. They can keep overcharging our kids year after year because of these programs. So again, I am in favor of students. Right? What happens is the governments, they enact these programs, and now the student loans have caused tuition prices to go through the roof, and now the students think they need the loans. They don't like, college is so expensive, how could I possibly go without student loans? And if Peter Schiff wants to take away student loans, I'll never be able to go to college. That's nonsense. If the student loans go away, the tuition will plunge. Everybody will still be able to go to college if they want to. They're just not going to have to spend the next 20 or 30 years of their lives paying for it, because it'll be a lot less expensive, just like it was before the government got involved. The government gets involved in these things in order to get votes, and they try to tell people that if they get involved, they're going to make things cheaper, but they end up making things more expensive, and now they create this culture of dependency because now they've driven costs up so much that people now think they depend on government aid to afford the services, when if the government aid wasn't there, the services would be much less expensive.
The increase in government aid to education that is causing tuition prices to rise. That there is a causal relationship. They're not rising together by sheer chance, by accident. It's because the government makes money available to students in the form of direct aid or guaranteed loans, that students have the money. And once the students have the money, then the universities are free to raise the prices because the students have the ability to pay. And then once the prices are raised, now the government sees higher prices, and they come back and they say, oh, now we need bigger grants and more guarantees, and then the universities have the green light to raise prices once again. And before the break, I was talking about the college tuitions and what would happen to them if the government were to simply back out of the market. If the government was not guaranteeing tuitions, guaranteeing loans, well, students couldn't borrow that much money because the banks wouldn't lend, because there's a high default rate in student loans. But the lenders don't care, because if there's a default, well, the government's there to pick up the tab. So just like with the housing market, you got a moral hazard. Students are able to borrow a lot of money even though they might not be able to pay it back because the government's guaranteeing the loan. Also, governments are giving students money directly, which they can then use to pay tuitions. If you took all that away, what would happen? Would it mean that nobody would go to college in this country because college tuitions would stay high and nobody would go, that all the classrooms would be empty? Well, of course not. What would happen is colleges would be in a situation where they finally had competitive free market pressures. They would be faced with a situation where they had empty classrooms and no students, and what would they do? Well, they would do what the airlines do when they have an empty plane and no passengers. They slash prices. They have a sale. Has there ever been a sale at a college tuition? Have they ever had a 20% off sale or a 30% off sale? No. Why should they? Because their customers keep getting money from the government to pay whatever tuition they want to charge. So we take away all these subsidies, and tuition prices will collapse. They'll have to. And universities will find ways to cut out the fat, to operate more efficiently. And given all of the labor-saving devices that exist today that didn't exist 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, college tuition should be lower now than it was then, adjusted for inflation. Not higher,